So can we start now, sir? Sir, with your permission, we'll start, sir.
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, all. I extend a warm welcome to all at the 23rd webinar of ASBM University on the topic, The Power of Now, a Contemporary Adaptation. We have with us our esteemed panel members, Mr. Vivek Patnaik, IAS retired, former Director, International Civil Aviation Organization, Montreal, Canada, and Ambassador Malay Mishra. I find immense pleasure in introducing our esteemed panel members. First, Mr. Vivek Patnaik, IAS retired, former Director, ICAO, Montreal, Canada. Mr. Vivek Patnaik started his professional career as a member of the Indian Administrative Service. For many people in our country, IAS is the be-all and end-all of life. However, for Sri Patnaik, this was just a beginning. He worked in various capacities and displayed his administrative acumen in multifarious activities. He took care of the problems of the marginal farmers and agricultural laborers as a project director in Keonjhar. He administered Mayurbhanj district as the collector and district magistrate with a human touch. He also proved his mettle in the corporate life as the managing director of a sugar plant. Moreover, as the managing director of Epicol, Odisha, he had sown the seeds of rapid industrialization of Odisha that we see today. What is important is that development has been his forte all through, wherever he worked and whatever he did. He then left the IAS, joined the International Administrative Service, and ended a name as the Director of International Civil Aviation Organization, Montreal, Canada. After completion of his tenure, he came back to Odisha and became the chairman of Odisha Public Service Commission. He has done pioneering work in the area of power sector reform, first as member, Utility Advisory Committee, and then a chairman of SESU. He is now heading Bhubaneswar Stock Exchange as its chairman. In fact, this exchange was set up in 1989 under his leadership as the then managing director of Epicol. He worked for some time as its administrator also. Sri Patnaik is a voracious leader and a social reformer. I welcome you, sir. Ambassador Dr. Malay Mishra. Malay Mishra did his post-graduation in political studies and MPhil in international studies from the prestigious Jawaharlal Nehru University in the 1970s. Interacting with the different political streams and gaining an electric and interdisciplinary knowledge formed his early worldview. He found himself in the ranks of the Indian Civil Service in 1977 and within 2 years joined the Foreign Service, posting in France, Senegal, Mauritius, USA, Iran, Germany, Seychelles, Trinidad and Tobago, and Hungary came his way as he moved up the diplomatic ladder in different positions. As the head of mission in his last 3 postings, he represented India in its multifaceted dimensions. While paying a good deal of emphasis on economic diplomacy, he equally promoted India's culture and heritage, yoga and Ayurveda. Among his many assignments at headquarters, he looked after policy making in the then Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs, which gave him broad exposure to handle the ubiquitous Indian overseas community and leverage their connection with the motherland in multiple ways. Subsequently, he looked after the multilateral economic relations desk for a brief period. Post-retirement in July 2015, he made a career transition by moving into an academic life. Prior to his departure from Budapest, he had registered for a doctoral program in the field of social justice, marginalization studies at the Corvinus University, Budapest. In September 2020, Ambassador Mishra defended his dissertation successfully on a comparative study of empowerment processes of marginalized communities in India and Hungary and was declared eligible for a doctorate. Besides being a research scholar and a visiting faculty, Dr. Malay Mishra, who calls himself a global citizen by design, has been a motivational speaker at several forums, both in India and abroad, and spoken extensively on diverse subjects. Following his doctorate, he would now like to devote full time to teaching, giving talks, taking part in webinars and seminars, motivating different groups of the society, particularly the marginalized sections who need knowledge intervention in a big way. The topic of his interest ranges from education, economy, industry to culture, politics, international relations with social issues at his forte. He would like to make a humble contribution to society as a thought leader while pursuing his intense passion for acquiring and disseminating knowledge to move towards a progressive and holistic society. Sir, I welcome you to the webinar.
Thank you.
The today topic is the power of now and contemporary adaptation. To my understanding, staying in the moment, keeping ego in check, and observing through without judgment are some of the powerful strategies in our quest for true happiness. So, giving this brief background, the present moment is now, and the now should be primary focus of life. Taking this thing into forward, I would now like to request Ambassador Malay Mishra to talk forward this.
Thank you very much, Professor Samantray, for your very kind introduction. Good afternoon to you all, ladies and gentlemen, and to Vivek Babu in particular for his esteemed presence in this panel. I am not an unknown face for ASBM. I had once taken part in another kind of discussion which was held on the theme of globalization, but that was not a virtual congregation like today. We had met and spoken on that subject. That was a few months ago. And when I came to know that ASBM has been holding a series of motivational talks for its young graduates, I made a kind of request if I could also be one of those speakers, to which I was told that my turn will come after that batch was over. And it seems now my turn has come. And I must also thank ASBM and Professor Biswajeet Pattanayak for giving me this opportunity to interact with you. I have particularly chosen this theme. It's a very dynamic theme, actually, the power of now. It may not be in your syllabus or something which you are familiar with as a theme, and maybe you may not hear somebody who would expound this theory more in terms of explaining what exactly it is. And I would also take you along on two different paths. One would be a kind of a spiritual, philosophical path, a knowledge path, and the other could be a kind of a rational, existential path, a kind of ontological path. And finally, we will converge on a certain area where I would think it will have a lot of relevance for students for today's generation who are entering these dynamic institutions like the ASBM and other places, and trying to find a place in the broader society. Why I chose the power of now was because when it released, it was written in 1997 by this person called Eckhart Tolle, who's actually a German person of German origin, but based in Canada. And he published this book in Vancouver with just a few thousand copies. But the fame of the book gradually spread far and wide, and it was by way of word of the mouth. And then more and more people took to the book as a kind of a basic reading and a gospel kind of thing. It was like something which they had never read or heard about, this particular theme, particularly in the Christian world. And then they came to that and studied it, and there have been many further researches on this theme, and several other writers have also come out on this theme. So I thought this would be an appropriate theme to talk to young, the younger generation of today. How do they develop themselves in terms of their self-growth, and what could be their impetus to develop their intellects, the minds, and even the hearts. How do they move in this society? That being the background, I would tell a few things in the beginning only, as by way of advice to the ASBM students, particularly since we are now there. And my advice is basically in three dimensions. The first dimension is about themselves, which is they as individual. How do they define themselves as an individual? Do they define an individual just by way of material gratification or by a thirst for recognition? Because these are the two basic impulses of individuals in the society. Either recognition or material gratification, which is you basically need, some kind of a income to satisfy your material urges, and you also need somewhere along the way recognition for what you're doing in the society. But I would say there is also a third impulse, and that is the social impulse, that I would like to call upon the younger generation, that they need to be socially active and socially relevant. So whatever they are doing, they should always find some kind of a connection with the society if they could. And if they could also, help in any way in doing something for the society in their own ways. You may have all come to know about the recent very unfortunate suicide of this LSR student, girl student from Telangana, who committed suicide because she didn't have a laptop to study, though she was studying in LSR. That speaks volumes about the kind of system we in India have, where our students are dying because of a lack of a laptop. They couldn't study, and therefore the student has nobody asked her, nobody told her anything, and then disconnected from the society, she committed suicide. I do not want, this should be some kind of a signal for all of us, but we should learn lessons from this. The second dimension would be the way we move out, the way we live our life, in the sense that we need to focus a lot on ourselves. When I say ourselves, again, I'm using, the individual, but individual having infinite possibility of expansion. That you as students, you as faculty, you as human beings, you have infinite potential to expand yourselves and to the fullest. Now, there is a Greek expression called Eudaimonia. Now, Eudaimonia was actually advocated by the Greek philosopher, the Greek philosopher Aristotle. And when he said, what is that meaning of that word? He said it is flourishing. It is human flourishing. That we need to expand ourselves to the fullest to flourish. And the third thing which I want to say is that stay away from negativity, because the world has become really a very difficult and different world today in which you are. And therefore, this world, this society has been seeing a lot of diverse, multiple problems, giving birth to multiple injustices in the society. And therefore, all these are creating multiple crisis points in the society. And therefore, you don't have to go far to be negative in your outlook. You just switch on the television, see the news, see the news anchors, how they are talking, what they are saying. Read the newspapers of the day. What are the main headlines of the newspapers? How depressing stories are coming out, how negativity is formed into the young students' minds right from a very, very sensitive period of their life. Please don't fall into that trap. Always maintain a certain positivity in your attitude, in your behavior. And this is how this book will help you tremendously. So with the permission of the faculty, I would like to recommend The Power of Now as a recommended reading, as a reading for all students of ASBM to take it along and read it. It's a very short book. It has about 150, 200 pages. But the book holds value in defining what is the, it defines now. First of all, it defines now. What is now? And then what is the power of now? And then because of now, it also defines what is I. So these are three very important concepts which Eckhart Tolle has given to the world, but these are not new concepts. These have been old concepts. And if I take you along the path of our Indian philosophical tradition and the Western philosophical tradition, which I'm going to do, you will see how these concepts are merging in individual philosophies of various parts. Mind you, this talk is going to be an ideational talk. This talk is going to be a motivational talk. So I would like you to ideate. I would like you to provoke yourself to discussions. And if possible, please ask your, any kind of questions or any kind of, queries you have in your mind. You can open them out. And as Professor Samant has said, he is making a listing in the chat box. Please put your questions in the chat box. As far as possible, we will try to answer that. Before I go back to Eckhart Tolle, let me talk to you about a great sage of our modern times. He's not very much modern. He's less in the world. His name was Ramana Maharshi. I don't know if many people know this. He was also called the sage of Arunachala, because he lived near a mountain called Arunachala Mountain, a very sacred mountain deemed to be in the state called Tiruvannamalai. Tiruvannamalai. It is close to Chennai. It is between Chennai and Puducherry. If you wish to go there and spend some time in the ashram, you can do that. And there the sage lived for about 60 odd years after leaving home. And his greatest discovery to the world of spirituality was a very simple question. He was a Tamil origin person. He didn't know much of any other language except Tamil. Even Tamil, he could not speak very well because he had a problem in communication, but he spoke in silence. And he said the silence speaks a lot more than vocal dialogues or any such thing. And disciples used to sit by him for hours and hours in silence. And when he opened his mouth, they just took out whatever he was saying in bits and pieces, transcribed that, and therefore thereafter developed their profound theories about what he was speaking about. Ramana Maharshi's core philosophy was to ask this question, Nana Yar. Nana Yar means very simply, who am I? Now, you may find it very simple. Who am I? Who are you? What is your identity? Again, back we are to the same question of identity. But this identity is not the identity I was talking about a little while ago. This identity is a fundamental question of who you are. Are you your name? Are you your designation? Are you your your institution? Are you your parents? You are none of this. Are you your body? Are you your mind? Are you even your heart? You are none of that. So who are you? So the task is to discover and keep on going deeper into yourself. Now, when I say self, you would be often using these words: myself, himself, herself, themselves. These are all relational self. They relate to a particular person. But this self is an absolute self. This self is the core of Ramana Maharshi's teachings, which comes straight down from Advaita Vedanta, which is one of the core Indian philosophical systems, as we know. One of the systems of Vedanta. That there is something called an absolute consciousness, which pervades us all, and that also rests within us as a being. And that Ramana said that that was the I factor. So how do you get to that? Obviously, your first main obstacle is your mind. Mind is a very fickle entity within yourself. It will not allow you to move beyond mind, because whenever you are coming to mind, mind is distracting you with 1,000 thoughts. And you just can't come out of those thoughts. You are forever, you are enmeshed in those thoughts, and therefore your progress is halted there. Ramana's teaching was to transcend that stage, go beyond that stage, go beyond the mind and discover the I factor, the self, what is within you. Now I come back to Eckhart Tolle again. When he says the power of now, he means now as a kala or time. It's a dimension of time. Now, philosophically, in our Indian philosophy, we have understood kala as cosmic time, as eternal time, as time which is anadi, which is ananta, which is beginningless, which is endless. That is how the Indian spiritual masters have explained time. Then again, they have broken it down to 3 different stages of time, which is the past, which flows into the present, and present, which looks up to the future. So there is a 3-dimensional concept of the triad, as you would say. But then Tolle said that the past and the future are of no meaning, because the present only explains what you are, what is I, what is yourself, that you are now in that self. So whatever you are doing today, now, is important, is essential. And what you are doing in the past, that has already gone. That may have been present at that time, but it is not present now. And what is going to happen tomorrow is not of any relevance today. It will come tomorrow. So the present is what we are going to be concerned about. And here I call upon all the younger generation people to heed to this advice, that you try to live in the present, in the now with a capital N. That is what you are going to live in the moment, as they say. But this moment is not a transitory moment. This moment is a permanent moment for you. This moment is going to be always there with you. And then Tolle goes on to expound his philosophy in his book on various aspects of the now. Of course, he starts by saying that the mind has to be subdued, if not demolished. The mind has to be superseded. The mind has to be transcended. But yet there is an advantage in the mind being there, because mind can also be creative. Because all creativity would also flow out of the mind. So you guard your mind Yet do not fall a slave to it. And you go beyond it and go to see what is behind that mind, behind the veil of ignorance, as we say. Jainism, which is one of the important elements of our Indian philosophical thought, has this concept of equal way they define time through the Nyaya Vaisheshika concept of Hinduism, that it also holds the present, the now, as of paramount importance, and it says the past and the future do not exist, that they can only be understood in relation to the present. So the present is what you are looking at and nothing beyond it. And this finds reverberations in many other philosophies, in Sufism, Islam. Rumi was one of the greatest advocates of this theory, that remain in the present means everything to you. Zen Buddhism talks about a concept of mindfulness, which means you concentrate everything on your mind to abolish the mind, to go beyond the mind. So there are various theories of how you define your I factor. And thereafter, as Toll says, you build your relationships, you build the concept of love. He defines as a very, very different kind of concept. Why does a man need a woman? Does he have to need? Does she have to need? And why is this mutual dependence on each other? All that he is explaining in that book. He's also explaining the concept of chi. Chi is something, an intermediate level before you reach the absolute consciousness, that it helps us to reach there through the chi. But now I would lead you to some European philosophers, and then I will try to find a parallel between what they are saying and what our Indian masters have said. I will first come to a 17th century French philosopher. His name was Rene Descartes. Perhaps some of you may have known Descartes. Descartes is credited with being the father of Western philosophy, father of Western rationality. He came after the Renaissance in the 17th century, and he gave to Western philosophy this great aphorism: I think, I exist. He took it from the great Renaissance masters. One of them was a great sculptor, again a French sculptor by the name of Rodin. His full name was Auguste Rodin. And if you go to Paris today, you will see a huge sculpture of his in the middle of Paris. The title of the sculpture is the Le Penseur. Le Penseur means the thinker, one who thinks. So Descartes said, Je pense, j'existe. In Latin, it said, cogito ergo sum. If you go to any university in Europe, anywhere, you see on the top of the building, on the masthead, inside the walls, this particular expression is inscribed. Cogito ergo sum. Cogito, I think, ergo sum, I exist. So, Descartes started with thinking. How do you think? You think with the mind. Why do you think? Because you want to dispel doubts in your mind. Because post-Renaissance period had given rise to a lot of doubt in people, because so many scientific theories were coming out, people wanting to prove themselves with this invention, that invention. And Descartes was a great mathematician, besides being a philosopher. So he started with doubt. He said, let me doubt. What can I doubt? Can I doubt myself? No. Why I cannot doubt myself? For the simple fact that I exist. So I'm sure that I exist because I can feel that I exist. And if I exist, I think, therefore I'm existing. So this was his philosophy, which was the most profound philosophy in the later part of European philosophy, which gave rise to existentialism. You must have read about this great movement of existentialism. I will touch upon existentialism in brief because I may not have so much time. One of the greatest exponents, contemporary exponents of this philosophy, existentialism, is Jean-Paul Sartre, also a Frenchman. Jean-Paul Sartre, he lived till very recent. He lived throughout the 20th century. A great revolutionary thinker, a playwright, a novelist of great acumen, philosopher. He was a multi-purpose, a multifaceted genius. Jean-Paul Sartre propounded this theory that existence precedes forms, meaning existence precedes interpretations, which means I first exist, and therefore I can interpret various things, I can write various things, I can read various things. But he departed from the earlier existentialists, saying that man cannot be satisfied with just thinking. He has to be more creative than just thinking. So the man will write, will read, will talk, will debate, will do all kinds of creative things. So he said that experience is also very much needed. So he then brought in the concept of experiential existentialism, which runs to this day, because Sartre has not yet been challenged. And now there are basically two streams of either you exist in the phenomenal world, which is called phenomenology, or you exist in the ephemeral world or in the world beyond. So the world beyond is what Indian philosophy is talking about. The world of phenomenon is what the Western philosophy is talking about. This is the basic distinction. Now, Eckhart Tolle made a very strong repudiation of Descartes and Western philosophers and of existentialism. When Descartes said, I think, therefore I exist, je pense, j'existe, Tolle didn't agree to that. He says, when you say, I think, you are equating thinking to I. And his whole concept was I has to go beyond thinking, because the thinking process is done by the mind. And he is trying to circumvent the mind to go to the I. So he says that the I cannot have a function like thinking. So this was his basic point of difference between Tolle and Descartes. They lived in different periods. Descartes is a very contemporary philosopher. And Tolle was a very contemporary philosopher, and Descartes lived in the 17th century. Sartre lived in the 20th century. So I am playing with all these ideas now to give you a concept of where you stand today. That there are several dimensions to life. Time itself has multifarious dimensions. You have a big spiritual dimension, you have a philosophical dimension, you have a mythological dimension, you have a secular dimension. You have to see which dimension you have to adjust to, and accordingly esteem the value of time in your life. That is very important, because unless you know what time is, you cannot understand what now is, because now solely rests on time. And now the main factor which generates that now is I. And you have to discover that I. A beautiful novel written by a German philosopher called Hermann Hesse. You may have, perhaps almost everybody would have heard this novel, if not read it. The name of the novel is Siddhartha. If you read this novel, it is a very, very short novel, but a very powerful novel. Siddhartha, German philosopher Hermann Hesse. You have to read this book to understand what the concept of time is. And the story goes like this in short, very short. The main protagonist of the story is a person called Siddhartha, who was there during the time of Buddha, Gautam Buddha, whose name was also Siddhartha. So there is a kind of irony there that this person is also Siddhartha, and the Siddhartha Gautama is now become Buddha in the same period. And then he wanders around in search of salvation, in search of nirvana. He comes to a big gathering where the great Buddha is addressing so many thousands of disciples, and he says at the end, you have to find your own salvation. I can't bring nirvana to you. Nirvana, enlightenment was my endeavor. You have to also effort in your way how you get nirvana, how you get your own salvation. So this Siddhartha of ours, the hero of our story, is a little frustrated. He comes to a bank of a river where he meets a boatman, Vasudeva. Vasudeva is older than him. He's been living with whatever his earnings are from rowing the boat from one side, one bank of the river to the other bank. He ferries people across the river, day in and day out. And Siddhartha comes and says, can I stay with you? Introduces himself. So Vasudeva says, of course, if you want, you stay with me. So Siddhartha builds a little hut for himself on the bank of the river, where Vasudeva is also there, and both of them live and they do together rowing the boat on the river. For Hermann Hesse, the river is important, and also the banks of the river. And how? At the end of Vasudeva's life, towards the last moment when he is expelling his last breath from his body, Vasudeva tells Siddhartha that look at the river. You have seen the river day in and day out. We have been working on this river by ferrying people across this river. This river will go on, but we shall pass. We shall move on. But the river will continue to flow. Now understand what Vasudeva meant by we. He meant human beings. He meant you and I will pass away one day. We'll breathe our last and go away. But the river will stay. And how will the river stay? How do we know the permanence of the river? By the banks. A river can only be found by its banks. If you didn't have two banks of one river, then it would be called something else, not a river. So the permanence of the river contrasted with the impermanence of humanity is what Vasudeva is teaching Siddhartha on the last day of his own life. And that was the supreme teaching which Siddhartha got. And he carries that teaching till the end of his life, and that is, as Hermann Hesse says, leads to Siddhartha's salvation, Siddhartha's nirvana. Why I am saying all that is we have to understand time in two distinct levels, at the level of impermanence and at the level of permanence. Eckhart Tolle is focusing on the level of permanence, the time factor. What has been justified by our Indian philosophical texts and also by Western philosophical texts, that level of impermanence of time. So I would like to end my little talk here and maybe see if there are any questions you would like to ask. I'm sure you'd have several questions, several doubts, because it's a pretty long discourse I could have given, but I have my esteemed co-panelist, Vivek Babu, and I would like to end my own talk here. And I request Vivek Babu to please come in and give his thoughts for the day, and until we wait on for the next session, which is the discussion session. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your erudite address. So now I will request Mr. Vivek Patnaik, IAS retired, to give his opinions. Sir, kindly unmute yourself.
Thank you very, very much, Professor, for introducing me, as well as for inviting me to speak on this occasion. And I feel privileged that you have chosen me as a co-panelist along with Ambassador Malay Mishra, whom I know for more than 40 years. And I have seen how he has grown in his career, and I have seen how much of study he has made. He's simply not an ambassador, he is a philosopher. And as you know, today from his statements or from his presentation, how beautifully he has explained to people and actually brought the people down to the earth, because he is actually worried as to why somebody had to resort to such an extreme step of bringing an end to one's life because a laptop. Well, this is so very. So let me first go to the fundamentals, because there are students. The theme is called the power of now. No wonder one should like to know what is power. Well, though, it comes from the French word poer and Latin word poeter, which means to be able to do. To be able. Power is the ability to do something. Ability to influence people or events, right or authority, do something. It means strength, the force, energy, etc. Commonly, the word power is used in ordinary parlance. Political power, government power, executive power, legislative power, judicial power, economic power, money power, military power, police power, national power, regional power, global power, corporate power, particularly with students of management, they are familiar with this. Then social power, intellectual power, legal power, moral, ethical power, cultural power, religious power, media power. Then women's power, empowering women. The recent book of Melinda Gates, Moment of Lift, How Empowering Women Changes the World. That's a power. Beautiful book written by her to appeal to people to give power to the women. So unfortunate, a girl took her life. Then comes the word child's power. Look at Greta Thunberg, who shook the world last year for the cause of environment of the world. Well, in the corporate world, the power of shareholders, the board of directors, stakeholders, consumers, customers' power, local people, regulators, government, legislators, and judicial bodies, civil society, etc. Power also is sometimes referred to as influence, and vice versa. Knowledge is power, they say, and power also creates knowledge. These are one forms of power. There are other power, mob power, muscle power, power of thugs, dacoits, kidnappers, terrorists. There is some concept called Stockholm syndrome, and the power is exercised by kidnapper. And there is a power of the past, power of the future, power now, the present power. Well, many people will say the present power is the power of virus, COVID-19. What effect the pandemic will have on power structure in the world, nationally, within the nation or the country, or in the corporate world. What will be the effect on the structure of companies? This is a subject which the students of management would like to study. Now, then comes the word spiritual power. And Dr. Malay Mishra, in his deliberation, has referred to the spiritual power. He quoted Maharshi Venkatramana. He has taken us to Jainism, to Buddhism, to Hinduism, to Islam, Christianity, Jain Buddhism. He has actually made us realize what the subject is. Actually, Eckhart Tolle's book was published sometime in the in the middle of the 90s of the last century. It has become quite a big seller. It's a very small book consisting of less than 200 pages, written in a very simple language. Very simple language. It is a question-answer form. I think I endorse Dr. Malay Mishra's view. The ASBM should buy this book for the library. And I would urge upon the students to read it. You can finish the book in 2 days' time. They are in such a simple language. But after every statement, a couple of statements, or question answer, he wants you to reflect. You should reflect. It will give it immense amount of joy. And I very strongly recommend, particularly now, this book is more relevant than before, perhaps. When the word now means, because the power of the now, what does it mean? Is the present time? Is it age, period, year, month, day, hour, minute, or second, or moment, or a part of a second, million part of a second? Words used in the title of this topic of the seminar or webinar come from this book. And then, of course, you have used the word contemporary adaptation. Therefore, we have to see how the power of now is relevant in the present context. I'll come to that later. Before that, I would like to say, this book conveys there's a big difference between life and living. It talks of eternity of life. He refers to Bhagavad Gita. In fact, I would recommend the students of ASBM should also read Bhagavad Gita with interpretations. I'll personally recommend they should read Dr. Radhakrishnan's book. Dr. Radhakrishnan was a philosopher, but at the same time, President of India. That's a book which gives it very good annotations with reference to Western philosophy as well. You see, this book conveys that how one should free oneself from the past and also from future. Live in present power. Live as in present form. Central theme is being, eternity of life, birth and death, I think Dr. Mishra mentioned about Leela, Indian seers. In fact, Eckhart Tolle has referred to the Indian seers of Leela. In fact, there is strong belief there is the transmigration of soul, there is life after death, life is eternal. All these things are there. And incidentally, in this context, I will also suggest read a book written by Brian Weiss. He's a professor of psychology. Many Lives and Many Masters. It's a beautiful book. He is a Jewish professor of psychology, and he has actually trying to give psychiatric treatment to one of his assistant, a lady, and while giving psychiatric treatment, he finds that the girls goes back to childhood and beyond, backwards, and she sees previous lives, and she's just a student of, she's just an ordinary laboratory assistant. But when she goes back to previous life, the philosophical treatise she makes is unbelievable. Brian Weiss says, after going through this experiment, I strongly believe there is life before death, and there is life after death. You see, here, the point which I would like to mention, differentiate mind from emotion, ego. The question, who I am, very good question. Being is not same thing as mind. Disengaging time from mind, freeing from memory the past, anticipation of the future also. Now is real, I think Dr. Malay Mishra said. In the past, there was now also. In your past, there were many nows. And in the future, there will be also many nows. But now, today, we are talking about the now, the present now. Mind is very important. It can create both positive as well as negative thoughts. Control negative thoughts. Actually, if you read Eckhart Tolle's book, he tells you how to be free yourself from the time, how to make yourself free from control of the mind. He gives many such examples. Just look at a beautiful bird. Don't think of it. Just look at it. Just listen to music. Don't think what you say. Just listen to music. That means you are disengaging your mind, but at the same time you're living. And you see, meditation, consciousness, close attention to everything. You see, when you're walking, just walk. You'll be seeing how you're freeing yourself from mind. Self-observation, not self-introspection, self-observation. Everybody is looking for freedom from unhappiness. Yes, the girl who ended her life looking for freedom from unhappiness, but she chose an extreme step. This is possible. Steady one's mind. Listen to inner voice of your conscience. What is wrong, what is right. Surrender to the now. Surrender is not to be seen as a weakness. Get out of your negative feelings. In this context, Art of Happiness in the Troubled World, written by Dalai Lama and Howard Cutler, is very important. I was distressed to see in the happiness index, India is 84. And the happiness index, Bhutan as 1.2 was number 1. The countries like Costa Rica were also in the first rank. Countries like the Scandinavian countries have also become number 1. Why India is 84? So This is a question we should come to our mind. You see, there is a difference. This book is talking about clock time from psychological time. Clock time is important. You have to have plan of action. You see, but the psychological time, it controls the feeling of guilt of the past, apprehension or pleasure of the future. There is a difference between life situation and life. Difference, well, having mentioned all that, I think intuition is something different from thinking. Einstein considered theory of intuitive feeling, both special theory and general theory. Well, in this world, you have got also people like Lord Buddha, Christ, Gandhi, Mandela, particularly Gandhi and Mandela, I'm quoting now, forgiveness. Like sometimes we do not forgive. This has come from them. And it comes because of the fact they forget the past. Well, sometimes you have iconoclasts in the history. Socrates, Karl Marx, they're all iconoclasts. And how do they come? Well, it is not necessarily they thought. Something came within themselves. You have to disengage your emotions from thoughts. Your prejudice, your bias, all these things come from your environment. They play a role. Environment, from what religion you come, what race you come, the caste you come, linguistic factor, gender factor, all these things come with the great prejudices, bias. And you should think, disengage your mind, and then you will be slowly getting out of a prejudice and bias. This requires some practice. And this book actually gives a wonderful prescription for it. You see, ego and fear. Fear of humiliation, incompleteness, these things destroy us. It's all because of the fact that we look back and see the time horizon, what happened to us that time. Or we think of the future. We live in the present, live in the present. Well, having said this, question comes to our mind, should this topic like this be discussed in management course? My answer is yes, it should be. I congratulate Dr. Malay Mishra for having suggested this topic. It helps in creation of holistic mind, a holistic approach. Today, engineers are taught humanities in Indian Institute of Technologies. Now, coming from philosophy to earth, from heaven to earth, from thin air to soil, from transcendental world to the physical world. I think Dr. Malay Mishra has not only given you the picture of the transcendental world, asking you the question, who am I? What is self? Who am I? He has also told you certain things which you should not take note of. How in your present existence, this you can practice. Take for example, all of us are concerned about the pandemic. We are concerned, yes. So many people have died. So many jobs have been lost. The economy has contracted all across the world. But you see, in spite of all that, we are still having communication. Internet is on, webinars are going on, railway tracks are there, aircraft are there, buses are there, men are there with brains, doctors are there. Many doctors have lost their lives, but many doctors are there, knowledge is there. See the positive side. Yes, what has been lost has been lost, I agree. Now, within this framework, how we should work, how we should do to see, obtain happiness in future. That can we think of. In fact, I would suggest to ASBM, you please think of a topic for the management courses. How to revive the economy in the country in spite of the pandemic, in spite of contraction. We have got many things in our favor. Whatever we have, how to make the best use of it. I think if we make an effort to start discussing on this subject, the purpose for which this subject was introduced by Dr. Malay Mishra will be adequately served. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Sir, one question is there for you. You talked about women empowerment. So Miss Pooja Gangwar is saying, why not we accept the power of women? Why always we talk about empowering women?
What is the action?
She is asking, why not we accept the power of women? Why only we talk about empowerment of women?
Why you, can I see the question? Who has asked this question?
Miss Pooja.
Pooja Gangawar.
Yeah.
Yes. I really believe he's not using this empowerment word for women. They don't need empowerment. Rather they empower others. Yes. In fact, I have referred to the book of Melinda Gates. The book was released in 2019. And in fact, Melinda Gates, everybody must be knowing, she's the wife of Bill Gates. Very rich lady. And she has gone around the world and seen the conditions of women in various parts. And she says the world cannot progress unless the women are in the lead. Yes, Pooja is right. The word empowerment may not be the right word, but she has used the word empowerment, that's why I use that word. But she actually says the women must be in the forefront. There should be equal power, even more power than the men. And she has given hundreds of examples from Africa to Asia, how the women have been more successful in handling situations than men. During the pandemic, you know very well, Angela Merkel, I think, handled it better. The New Zealand Prime Minister, who is a lady, also handled better. In the Scandinavian countries, also there were women who have done better as prime ministers. This is my impression as well. Yes.
Sir, one question is for Dr. Malay Mishra by Mr. Guru Prasad Das. At the time of difficulties, what are the factors to control one's mind?
Yes, that's a very good question, and Toll has an answer for that. What he's saying is you try to circumvent the mind as far as possible. You try to put good thoughts into your mind by distracting the mind from useless pursuits, by disturbing thoughts. So he says, because you have to live with the mind, you want to go beyond the mind and to discover your own self, your own I, that is the ideal. But in most circumstances, we cannot do that. We have to keep on grappling with the mind. So what he says is, you put the mind to creative use. As Vivek Babu also said, that we cannot abstract ourselves from the mind. We have to use the mind to go beyond the mind. In other words, we have to go to the I thought but use the mind for that. So in case of difficulties, like all of us have difficulties, how do you get over the mind or beyond the mind? And that is what Toll has explained very beautifully in his book. How do you get over the difficulties? And he says you have to silence the mind. You have to see that the mind emits less number of disturbing thoughts than it should be. So silence the mind. Once you adopt this posture of silence, your difficulties will cease to exist. And what does he mean by silence? Silence he means as meditation. What we know as meditation in our Indian philosophy is basically to silence ourselves, to lessen our thought process, to lessen the disturbances which is coming from our mind. So that is when we feel, after a bout of meditation, we feel very happy. It gives the happiness. So you have to do that. It is a technique which you have to adopt in life in general. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I think there is no more questions.
I think I saw a question whether this book is available on Amazon and Flipkart. Yes, it is. Both Amazon and Flipkart, they are available, and you can place order for this book straight away.
Yeah,
and please do that tonight only.
I will show you the book on the screen.
Yes, yes.
I think this book, very small book, paperback version, very well written in very simple language, question answer. And let the students start reading it. Let them read 5 pages a day and reflect. Okay, and you will see what peace of mind they will get.
Thank you, sir.
And it says in the byline that it is a guide to spiritual enlightenment.
Exactly.
It can be less correct.
Exactly.
Because this actually, the mind could enlighten you, the mind could distract you. So when you hit at the mind, when you attack the mind, you are one step towards enlightenment. Of course, spiritual enlightenment, in my view, is a tautology, because every enlightenment is spiritual. Yes. Unless you are spiritual, you can't proceed in the path of enlightenment. But he says the power of now, a guide to spiritual enlightenment, which means this is a daily guide for you. As Vivek very rightly said, keep it before you. You take one question, one answer, and then reflect over it. Then go further. That way, the teachings of Eckhart Tolle will grow in you, and you will develop more in your life. It is a self-help book. It is a great motivational book for you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, thank you for your nice words. Sir, at last, I would like to thank you, the panel members. But the takeaways, what I got it from Dr. Maulana Mishra and Mr. Vivek Patnaik, that the improved life by continuously focusing on the present, breaking mind control by observing thoughts without any judgment, living in the present can improve relationships, surrendering to the present doesn't mean need to live a passive life, structure of power and spiritual power, now it is called real, listen to your inner voice and surrender to now. So I think these are all the main points and takeaways which we have got it from your from the discussion. So I would like to thank Mr. Vivek Patnaik, IS retired, former Director, International Civil Aviation Organization, Montreal, Canada, and Ambassador Dr. Maulana Mishra for their enlightening address. I would also like to thank my President, Dr. Biswajeet Pattanayak, my Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Kalyan Shankar Ray, and my Pro-Vice Chancellor, Dr. Falgu Niranjana, and my webinar team for conducting this function. So we'll meet you again with the next theme on 24th webinar. Thank you. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you both.